Hello again, this is Preheat. Welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. So I recently came out with my Sunfury guide, and I see a lot of comments talking about how it's confusing or overly complicated, and there actually are optimizations that have been made by Porum, primarily, but other folks as well, on the APL that have now simplified the rotation and also kept the damage basically the same and even improved it in some ways. So if you're seeing that video and you're thinking this is too complicated, there's no way I'm going to figure this out, I'm here today to tell you it's actually a lot easier than you think. So let's start off with something I see a lot of people confused about, and honestly, this is kind of Blizzard's fault, but there are two buffs, okay? One is called Spellfire Sphere, one is called Spellfire Spheres, plural, okay? The one that you care about is this buff right here. You see it? This is the orb that's blue with the red fire around it and the red background. That is the buff that you actually track the stacks of. You do not care about this icon up here. This is just bird food. You don't have to worry about that one. The one we care about is the Spellfire Spheres, plural. The next thing I want to talk about, and I've covered this before, is spell queuing. Okay, so at the top here, we have an example of a spell cast. So the red represents the delay, the wait before the action takes place, which is represented in green. In the case of an instant cast or a GCD, we have the orange as the delay, but notice how it happens after the cast. So that it begins with the cast, and then we have a delay afterwards. And then here at the bottom, we have what a channeled spell would look like, where we have basically the action taking place in an interval. In this example, it's Arcane Missiles, so there are going to be 8 in total events that are going to happen here over the course of the channel. This is just simplified, but I'm just going to show you. So if you put a GCD in a cast here, if you queue it up during the cast, so let's say that, I press the button to queue it, starting like right here. Okay, this is like, we'll call this the spell queue window, right? If this is my spell queue window and I start spamming Barrage right here, what's going to happen is the game is going to basically have both of the spells complete at the same time. The game is going to look basically at this moment right here to see if the casts have some sort of modifiers on them. All right, so the first step is the game is going to say, all right, looks like Nether Precision was up for both of these casts. So both of these casts are going to get a 20% damage increase, right? And then it's going to say, all right, how many spells got the 20% damage increase? Okay, it looks like 2. So we're going to remove 2 Nether Precision buffs, right? Now, the reason why we can make use of this with spell queuing is because if we do not have 2 stacks of Nether Precision, the game will still give us 20% on both spells. It's just whenever it goes to this check, it only has 1, right? So it can't do a -2 NP on this because there's only 1 to spend. So essentially, we get 1 for free. Think of it like going to the grocery store with coupons, and the system they have is 25 years old. So if you ring up the coupon at the very end, it applies the bonus to both the items that you rung up at the same time, and you get a discount on 2 items. It's just a quirk of a weird old system. This kind of affects every spell unless it has some sort of other logic to it or reason why the spell isn't actually calculating the damage on cast. Moving on to Arcane Missiles, we are always going to clip Arcane Missiles on the GCD as Sunfury. The reason why is because it perfectly lines up with the 6th tick. Now, if you have like double lust and everything else, like you may end up having a weird situation where your GCD ends up being larger than this window. And in that case, you'll get the full missiles. But that's kind of like the odd case, and it doesn't really matter for our intents and purposes. Like that's just a bonus if it happens. All right, so moving on, we're going to talk about the APL Complements of Porum. So the Arcane Mage guide writer for Wowhead is the one who has been doing the majority of the work on this, although other folks have been weighing in with other ideas. But we're going to talk about how it actually plays. I'm not actually going to show the APL. I basically translate it here for you. So the priority is just 6 steps. All right, there's just 6 steps. The number 1 priority is you want a shifting power for CDR, cooldown reduction. You want to get cooldown reduction from shifting power. That means if your cooldowns are over 15 seconds out, and you aren't currently in cooldown, so you don't have Arcane Surge up, Soul up, Siphon Power, that sort of stuff, then you want to make sure that you are pressing Shifting Power. Next up is Arcane Orb for charges. Now keep in mind, Sunfury basically stays at 4 charges the whole time. So this Arcane Orb is really only happening whenever you are low on mana and your evocation isn't quite up. So you barely ever press Orb in single target, all right? But what you will do is if you had to dump with Barrage and you aren't at 4 charges, not being at 4 charges is really bad for your damage, so you want to use the orb if you have it to try and get back. You're going to be doing that at anything less than 2 charges. But keep in mind, you do not want to do this during Arcane Soul. Okay, during Arcane Soul, just use sending a Barrage will give you 4 charges. So obviously, pressing Orb in that case would just completely waste it. Moving on from there, we have step 3. And this is where we do have a little bit of nuance. But basically, we want to Arcane Barrage in any situation where we can remain at 4 charges while also getting damage from it. And we also have the incentive of double dipping on Nether Precision as well. So like if we can hit both of those, that's great. But basically what this is going to do is it's going to queue a Barrage from a Blast if we have Burden of Power, which we already talked about. If you have the Burden of Power buff, you want to press Arcane Blast into Arcane Barrage. This is the situation where you get to 5 Spellfire Spheres, you do another Arcane Blast or Arcane Barrage. Now you have Burden of Power, you blast into Barrage, right? That remains at 4 charges. And then the second one is you would blast into Barrage with Intuition. So Intuition will also keep you at 4 charges. You ideally want to do this whenever you're on your last deck another Precision, because then you double dip again. And then moving on from there, we do not want to mess up our Spellfire Spheres. Okay, so if there's a situation where we would want to use a Barrage under these conditions, right, to get back to 4 charges, but it would throw our Spellfire Spheres out of whack, maybe Intuition procs whenever we have Burden of Power, we would not Barrage on its own. We want to make sure we blast into that Barrage. That's all that's really saying there. And then from there, we have Barrage into Arcane Soul if you're less than 3 clear casting. So this is a big one. The damage difference in this, by the way, from what I put in the guide is very, very minimal, but it's easier to understand. So I think it's just better overall. Whenever your Arcane Soul procs, if you are not at 3 clear casting, you want to immediately get to 3 clear casting, okay? That is your first goal. As soon as Arcane Soul procs, spam Barrage until you see 3 clear casting. Once you're at 3 clear casting, that's when you're going to alternate between missiles and Barrage, okay? But we don't want to overcap on clear casting if we can manage to not do that. Also, try to end every Arcane Soul with the last global being Arcane Barrage. That's the only exception where it's like you may overcap on your clear casting, but that's fine. Just try to have the last global of Arcane Soul be Arcane Barrage. And then after that, we have the Barrage and the Touch of the Magi. This is the common case. In most cases, you're going to Barrage into your Touch of the Magi because you're going to have 4 charges. On the opener, you don't do that. That's something I actually found. So whenever you are in your opener and you're first starting out and you have 0 charges, if you're not playing high voltage, you want to make sure that you use Touch of the Magi after your Arcane Soul instead of using the Barrage into the Touch of the Magi. Next up is Arcane Missiles, and this is really simple. If you have 3 clear casting, then you're just going to press Missiles, right? You're also going to press Missiles in any case where Nether Precision is down and you want to get it back up. And you're also going to press it whenever your Nether Precision is at 1 stack and you're about to use your Touch of the Magi. Because for Touch, we want to make sure we're going in with 2 Nether Precisions. That way, whenever we do our Barrage and the Touch, we consume 1. And then afterwards, we can do our Blast, and that Blast is going to be buffed. So the logic in the sim is basically it's going to use Arcane Missiles if it's available. So that's CC up. And it's also going to check if Nether Precision is down or if you have 3 clear casts. And then obviously I gave you the Touch of the Magi condition as well. But this part right here, GI down, this is Glorious Incandescence. You don't really see this buff like 99% of the time. But just know that like if you see Glorious Incandescence up, then you would not want a missile in that case because you'd actually want to get back to 4 charges first. And then you would want a missile and then move on from there. So that's just like a weird edge case. But just know that like typically in single target, this is not really something you see. And then below that, we just want to press Arcane Blast, right? And Arcane Blast typically is going to have Nether Precision, but it may not always have it. But basically, we're going to want to just use Arcane Blast as long as we have the mana for it. And if we don't have the mana for it, then we want to press Arcane Barrage. That is really it to the rotation. We can basically simplify it down to these 4 steps right here. You're using Barrage whenever you can get back to 4 charges or into Touch of the Magi. You're using Missiles if you don't have Nether Precision up, or if you're about to use Touch of the Magi and you have 1 Nether Precision. You're using Arcane Blast if you have the mana for it. Otherwise, you're Arcane Barraging. I'm simplifying here, but 4 steps. Fairly simple here. And then obviously in cooldowns, we do like a set kind of rotation. So whenever we have cooldowns up, we're going to be using Evocation. After Evocation, if we don't have Nether Precision up, we obviously want to get Nether Precision. That's done through Arcane Missiles. And then after that, if we have 4 charges, we're going to Barrage into Touch of the Magi. If we don't have 4 charges, then we'll just use Touch of the Magi on its own. That really only happens on the opener. Only really happens once the entire fight. Basically, the rest of the fight, you're always going to be doing Barrage into Touch of the Magi. And then you're just back to the normal rotation as seen above. If you didn't catch my last video, here are the talents for single target. And if you're moving to 2 target, then you'd want to obviously take out Bobble and put it into Arcane Cleave. Always have this if there's more than 1 target. Another swap that you can make at 2 or more targets that's pretty nice is moving 1 point out of Prodigious Savant into Barrage. This is a very, very minor damage loss in single target, but in 2 target, this is probably going to be worth it. And then if you increase the target count to, let's say, 3 or more targets, then we can take out Prodigious Savant, put it into high voltage. This allows us to cast a lot more barrages, and Orb is going to reward that by giving us charges back. So more charges we spend, the better this gets. And then obviously, if you want a low quality of life, you could move Energized Familiar into Orb. That just allows you to have more bad luck protection in your cooldowns, since you'd be saving Orb for your cooldowns and being able to get to 4 charges back again. And then if you're in Cleave, Sunfury Execution is a little bit better. So obviously between these two, Savor the Moment's better in single target, but just go Execution if you want a little bit more AoE. Okay, just to show the opener again, we use Evocation before the pull. Obviously, you could have like Barrier and Mirror Image up here too. That's generally recommended. We're going to open with the Missile. So Arcane Missiles goes out, and then I'm actually going to clip this Missile with my Lust and Potion and everything else if I was using that stuff. But in this case, I'm just going to Arcane Surge. So we use Arcane Surge, and we're going to press Touch of the Magi as soon as this Surge is finishing. So I'm going to be mashing Touch of the Magi here, and then I'm going to immediately cast Arcane Blast. So Touch goes out, I'm blasting, and I use the 2 Nether Precision here. In this case, I get the Intuition proc, and I actually react in this moment, so I'm actually going to queue a Barrage from this blast. I have 1 stack of Nether Precision, Intuition is up, we are good to go. We go ahead and queue the Barrage here. And then in this situation, I don't have Nether Precision up. I want to continue blasting, so I need to use a Missiles. I'm going to use the Missiles, and then clip it, and then do 2 blasts here. And then, obviously, in this case, this is my last one, so I need to queue up another Missile after that's used. And since we're at 5 and we have 2 Nether Precision, we're just going to do a blast into a Blast Barrage here. And that double dips on the Burden and the Nether Precision. We love that. And then we're going to Missiles here and clip the Missiles again. So 2 blasts afterwards. Use another Missile since I just got that proc, so we'll Missiles right here. And then now we're at Arcane Surge. So as this is ending, I queued the Barrage because Arcane Soul was about to proc at the end of Arcane Surge. So here the first goal is just to immediately get to 3 clear casting. So 1, 2, 3, and now I'm going to alternate between Missiles and Barraging, but I'm going to finish with a Barrage. Boom, and we're at 3. All right, and then we finish out with 3, and then here I have another Precision up, and I'm going to go ahead and just use the Blast, but you could also just Missile here. And then we use the Missiles after that Blast, and now we're going to Blast twice again, and I'm going to need to use Shifting Power here, right? So Shifting Power needs to be used before this Touch of the Magi is up. And obviously I'm outside the cooldown, so I'm going to go ahead and go for a Shifting Power here. And then obviously after the Shifting Power, I want to use the Missile so I can get another Precision, and I have Burden of Power already up, so that's good to go. So I'm going to Missile here, and then I'm going to queue a Blast into Barrage on its own. Boom, that happens. Okay, and Touch of the Magi is coming up, so now I'm going to press Missiles to get another Precision, 2 stacks of it. So we press the Missiles. So here we're going to clip the Missiles with an Arcane Barrage, and we're going to immediately apply Touch of the Magi afterwards. That happens right here. And then obviously I have another Precision up, so I'm just going to, blast right here. So yeah, sometimes you're going to end up finding yourself without a Missile at 5 stacks, and that's totally fine. Obviously, if you get a Missiles, great, as long as you can react to it. But like if it comes from the blast that you're about to queue from, you won't be able to react in time. But as it turns out, not always having Nether Precision to stack with Burden of Power, as long as you're making use of all of your clear casts, ends up actually being basically DPS neutral. So there's no reason to overcomplicate it unless you just prefer that playstyle. So yeah, these optimizations, by the way, are all just for like single target. If you want to know the AoE stuff, definitely go check out my previous video on Sunfury. I just wanted to make sure that you understood it. Like in single target, this is actually more simple than we initially thought, more simple than I put forth in my previous video. And I want to make sure that you're aware of that. So maybe if you're on the fence about learning Sunfury, maybe that will incentivize you to try this thing out, because it really is more simple than you think. But anyways, if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more of my content, be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.